Hello, my name is Jamie McLean and welcome to this, my first video on product management. The topic today is innovation techniques. So in this video, I'll be covering the meaning of innovation, spontaneous ideation, some example techniques, some common elements in those techniques, and my personal approach. So first of all, what is innovation? Well, the dictionary definition is pretty straightforward, something new or different, and it comes from a Latin root. In colloquial language, we tend to think of it as the creation of uniqueness. So that can be by accident, which requires inspiration, or by a process, which requires ideation. In business, quite commonly it's used to just mean to change faster than the competition, and somehow it becomes a little bit diluted. But today, we'll be talking about it in terms of the creation of uniqueness. So, spontaneous ideation. This is maybe what we think of in terms of an inventor. So the most famous inventor probably is Archimedes, who had the eureka moment. Eureka meaning I have found it in ancient Greek. And he discovered displacement in his bathtub. So every day, many of us have great ideas, particularly in places like the shower or the bath or out when we're walking on a sunny day. And there's many scientific studies you can look at online that they basically all come to the conclusion that those situations where we have these great ideas are when we're feeling good or feeling relaxed, and when our mind isn't busy and we're not focused. So particularly no screens, no reading, and no talking. That is difficult to generate in a work context, and unfortunately that's what most companies want. They try that quite commonly through things like brainstorming, but particularly unstructured brainstorming or forced brainstorming can actually be very unproductive or difficult. They can be good, but equally just saying brainstorming doesn't necessarily get you a solution. Google have some idea showers, so rooms that look like shower cubicles. You can go and seal yourself away from the rest of the office. And they have Lego playrooms, so you can get your body thinking about a different thing and maybe solving different problems. And many styling and design studios have pool tables or video games consoles, again, to distract and separate from the traditional work context and get the mind flowing. So those can be great, but those aren't a technique. Those are just ways of getting things done, getting your mind more relaxed. So what about actual techniques? So normally you want to create something new, but you don't know how. Normally in this situation you have some element to start with. So you have a thing, a solution, a technique, a technology, or maybe you have a customer need or a customer problem, or you have a market. And what you want is an application for that technology or that thing, or a solution to the customer problem, or you just want some of that market share. So what you need is a way of connecting those two sides of the situation. You need a tool, a technique, a process, or a framework. So I'll give you a few of those now. First, let's talk about whether or not innovation can be problem solving. So Netflix is a very good example. Before Netflix existed, you could go to see a movie at the cinema, you could buy a movie or rent a movie, and really at the beginning they were competing with stores like Blockbuster, where you'd physically go and rent a movie. And in those situations, you had lots of problems. You had a convenience problem because you physically like to travel. You had a choice problem because it was limited by the stock where you were going. And sometimes you had a price or flexibility problem. So Netflix very much was solving a problem. So yes, absolutely, innovation and ideation can be problem solving, and I would say probably most of the time that's what it's used for. The good thing about problem solving is there's a lot of well-defined processes based on real examples for problem solving, and anything which is a well-defined process with real examples is great for engineers. So these are particularly used in engineering. The first one I want to talk about is something called Triz. It's a Russian acronym, but in English what it means is the theory of inventive problem solving. So it was created way back in 1946 by a gentleman analyzing lots of patents and looking for commonalities. And his theory was that actually everything that's being solved has been solved in similar ways or using similar techniques before. So if you look at enough data on how things have been solved, you'll find a tool for everything. So he built this into a tool, and that tool says that if you look at the change in time of an item or a problem, you look at the change in space, of an item or a problem, you look at known problems from those patents or known solutions from those patents, you will be able to find a solution. And he developed this matrix of 39 common contradictions and 40 inventive principles, and you can look at it online. And it's very, very interesting, particularly for hardware engineering problems. There's another solution called Kepner-Tregoe, or KT. It was developed by two gentlemen, Dr. Kepler and Dr. Tregoe, in the 1950s, and they were looking much more at strategic decision making. So they were analyzing US, in particular, strategic decision making. So how people make decisions. They wrote a very famous book on this. They decided that actually there's 4 steps to this situation. There's to this problem solving. So there's the situation, the problem, the decision, and the opportunity. And it's about defining those, defining the context of those things. What's very useful for engineers is not analysis. And is not analysis is very familiar to anyone who's worked on a car. So if your engine won't start on a petrol or diesel car, you just say, is it the fuel? Is it the spark? Is it the air? Is it not? No, okay, then that rules it out very quickly. So that's the way that one of the ways that Kepner-Tregoe works quite well. And now Kepner-Tregoe has software tools and a consultancy to deal with this. And again, you can look online and find this. Some other tools, so FMEA, which is failure modes and effects analysis. This is looking at making a matrix of all the possible ways that something could break or fail. Again, very good for engineers. There's another one called fault tree analysis. This is actually looking at, you have a problem and you want to figure out how that particular problem has happened. So it's looking at one problem. There's another tool, which is the 5 whys questioning, which simply means just keep asking why 5 times. So why did you get up in the morning? Because my alarm went off. Or why did the alarm go off? Because I set the alarm at that time. And you keep going until you get to the bottom of the question, the real reason. And there's another tool which is similar to FMEA, and which is fishbone or Ishikawa diagrams. And they again look at all the possible causes and how they get to a problem. So the question is, are all ideas problem solving? Because those tools are really great for problem solving, but are all ideas problem solving? And if you think about a good example, I think is supermarket candy. So before you purchase the supermarket candy, you've actually arrived at the checkout with all of your planned purchases. So this is something completely unplanned. That's the whole point of supermarket candy. So what's the problem here? Are you hungry? Well, most of the time, no. Are you bored? Well, again, at this point, no. I'm focused on paying for my food. Do you need energy? Again, most of the time, no. So it's very difficult to understand what is the problem here. And actually, when you think about situations like art or any kind of entertainment, anything you get for enjoyment, it's difficult to fit into the problem-solving context. So rather than solving a problem, a product or a service can be a positive and potentially unexpected situation. So some of these next tools are very good at dealing with those situations. So the first one is design thinking. Design thinking is a common term in software design, and particularly UX. It's very trendy. But actually, it's the basic process is the same as engineering design. And it's the same as what I've used for the last 20 years of my career. So most engineers will find this familiar. Very simply, it says start with understanding your customer, define the problem that the customer has, generate some solutions, build a prototype, test the prototype. So that is basic engineering, actually. When you get to testing the prototype, if you find a problem, loop back to one of the earlier stages and do it again. If you don't find a problem, just build it. So that's just production. It should be iterative, so you should get to the end, and you should always actually go back and check and see if you can make it better. And in software terms, it can be nonlinear, so things can happen in parallel, so you can make some solutions while you're talking to the customer. Generally in engineering, we don't do that sort of thing, but that seems to be something very trendy in software. I would say that for the ideate solution step, it actually just says brainstorm. So that doesn't necessarily help you find solutions, but this is a process where you can get the tools to build up. So maybe you can help start to find those solutions. One that I've used, which I found really useful, is the value proposition canvas, created by Dr. Osterwalder. He has a company, Strategizer, and I recommend you go to the website and have a look. It's a very simple tool, but actually that makes it very easy to use and very clear. You start by defining the customer situation. You then brainstorm some solutions, and again, the technique here is just brainstorming. But then you connect those solutions with the customer problem, and that helps you add value, and that gives you your value proposition. And that's the really useful bit. It helps frame it in a way that you can focus on adding value. So this is very simple but very useful tool, I found. Sometimes we find that tool can generate some really nice solutions, but they're not practical to put into production. And that's because you have other constraints outside of just the pure idea. And in that situation, the lean and the business model canvas and the innovation canvas, all similar things, are quite useful. Again, the work of the same doctor can be found at the same website. It's more holistic. It includes how are you going to sell your product or your service? How are you going to engineer, manufacture and supply it? And how are you going to make money off of it? So this is a more practical tool. Other tools are available, particularly for startups and software companies. There's many tools online. Here I've listed a few. I will put them in the description of the YouTube video. One of the ones that's quite interesting to look at is Milwaukee Tools' innovation process on this list. But one care point is, remember, if you're ever Google searching for innovation, lots of people use innovation in different ways. So particularly it can be referring to how a startup company gets funded, how you get funding, how you bring once you have an idea, how you actually bring it into production, which is not what I've been talking about in this video. So just use care with that. And I'm interested to hear if you have a recommendation. These are just some of the tools I've used, but for sure there's many tools out there, and I'm interested to know if there's any better ones. So the common elements, if you look at all of these different tools, are to deeply understand the customer or the situation, if it's a problem, to define the customer need, want, and problem, and to define it very well, to identify some possible solutions, and then match those solutions to the customer need. So that fundamentally is how ideation works in those 4 steps. The goal at this stage is to create a concept statement. So that's something like, I want to solve a problem or give a benefit to a particular customer or to a particular situation by offering a product or a service. It should be one sentence. You should be able to say it very quickly. If it's not, it's too complicated. But at this stage, it should be quite simple. My personal approach is a little bit more complicated than some of those that I've shown, but it's worked for me many times in the past. So many of the techniques only focus on the exact issue or the exact customer, and they only focus on the current situation, today's situation. But when I ideate, I want to understand the bigger picture context driving the situation, which helps me understand why. Also, I want to understand what's happened before. So, right now electric cars are very trendy, but actually the first cars were electric. If you go back to the early 1900s, the late 1800s, there were many electric cars back then. So understanding why they didn't work, why they didn't continue, can help you. And as Triz shows, many ways of solving problems have been tried somewhere in the past, so you might get a good idea from understanding that. And if you understand that historical context, then you might be able to estimate the future. And that's very important because that's where your product is going to exist. So what I have is this kind of simple matrix. I've got 3 time columns and 3 kind of situational columns. So I want to understand the end user and situation. So from a big picture point of view, I want to understand what's going on with society, but then I also want to understand the specific customer I'm targeting. I want to understand the external factors, the things I can't control. So that could be regulation or technology or some other topic, but big picture, something you can't control. And then something that you can't control, which is much more focused, is the market. And I'll talk about competitors in the market in another video. And then we want to look at our company, who we're trying to sell, who we're trying to make the product and who we're trying to sell for our brand. So big picture, you want to look at the brand, and then more detailed, you want to look at the products. And you want to look at all of those things, what's happened in the past, what's happening right now, and where do you want to go in the future. And ideally, you want to end up with the green box in the bottom right corner as your future product. And if you look past, present, and future, then that'll give you trend, and it should give you some confidence that you're going in the right direction. So that's not enough. You still need to deeply understand the root of your customer needs, want, and usage. So you need to start at the top and go down, down, down until you get to that root. You need to understand the competitors and alternatives to creating something unique. So if you're looking at cars, you also want to consider public transport and bicycles and walking and things like that. And you also want to understand how you're going to create value by delivering uniqueness, function, and emotion. And I'll talk about value in another video as well. So I hope you enjoyed that video. In the next video, I'll be talking about learning from your customer. Thank you very much.